Since the US-Iran conflict began, Iran has launched hundreds of drones and missiles at Arab Gulf states in an unexpected and far-reaching assault. All 7 Gulf countries, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Bahrain, Qatar, Kuwait, Jordan, and Oman, have now faced attacks on their infrastructure, including non-military targets such as luxury hotels, apartment complexes, airports, and oil fields. These strikes have placed the region in a difficult dilemma: either push harder for regional peace or join the war after these violations of their sovereignty. In this video, I'll explain why Iran has suddenly been attacking the Gulf states and how they might respond. So let's start with some context on Iran-Gulf state relations. Historically, relations have been shaky between the Islamic Republic of Iran, a Shia-majority country, and the Gulf states, which are mostly Sunni-majority monarchies. This tension exists partly because of religious differences, but also because the Gulf monarchies have long viewed Iran and its proxy network as a threat to regional stability. In 2020, Iran-Gulf relations were strained even further by the Abraham Accords, which involved the normalization of relations between Israel, Iran's regional enemy, and several Gulf states, including the UAE and Bahrain. This development was widely seen as a way for Arab states to move beyond the Palestinian issue, which had historically prevented multilateral normalization between Israel and the Gulf. It also created what many analysts described as a kind of anti-Iran containment axis between Israel and several Arab states in the Middle East. However, after October 7th, Gulf foreign policy began to shift dramatically. Israel's attack on Gaza brought the Palestinian issue back to the forefront, essentially halting further normalization efforts. At the same time, Israel's campaign against Iran's proxy network, along with its willingness to intervene not just in Gaza, but also in Syria, Lebanon, and Yemen, created a growing perception in the Gulf that Israel, not Iran, might be the bigger source of regional instability. This led to some degree of diplomatic easing between Iran and several Gulf states, most notably Saudi Arabia. In April, for instance, Saudi Arabia's defense minister visited Tehran, the most senior Saudi royal to visit the country in decades. During that visit, the minister delivered a letter from the Saudi king to Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. The letter reportedly expressed support for both a potential Saudi-Iran security pact and the prospective nuclear deal that was being negotiated between Iran and the United States. Both of these developments would have been almost unimaginable just a few years earlier, as recently as 2019, where it seemed entirely possible that Saudi Arabia and Iran might be heading toward war. This diplomatic rapprochement was widely cited as one of the main reasons that during last June's 12-day conflict, Iran mostly refrained from attacking Gulf targets, with the exception of some symbolic strikes on the U.S. Al Udeid airbase in Qatar. It also helps explain why the vast majority of Gulf states, including Saudi Arabia, have reportedly been urging the United States not to escalate militarily against Iran, and instead encouraging Washington to continue negotiations. Several Gulf states have also played an active diplomatic role. Oman, in particular, has helped mediate recent negotiations between Iran and the United States. Late last week, Oman's foreign minister publicly stated that a deal was within reach, claiming that Iran had agreed to never stockpile enriched uranium and to significantly dilute its existing stockpile, something he described as a major breakthrough that had not been achieved before. If you look closely, Oman's message was also a subtle signal. If the United States chose military action despite negotiations progressing, it would likely be seen as a war of choice. However, negotiations ultimately failed to produce an agreement. The United States, together with Israel, then launched a large-scale military campaign against Iran, reportedly striking more than 130 locations and killing hundreds. But unlike last year, Iran responded far more aggressively. Initially, Iran retaliated by targeting U.S. air bases in the Gulf. But the escalation quickly spread. Iran launched drones toward nearly every Gulf state except Oman. Soon after, Iranian forces began striking non-military infrastructure, including a port in Abu Dhabi, a Saudi oil refinery, and airports in Qatar, Bahrain, and Kuwait. By Sunday evening, even Oman, The only Gulf country that had not previously been attacked reported a drone strike on one of its commercial ports. Then, on Monday evening, 2 Iranian drones reportedly struck near the U.S. Embassy in Riyadh. So the question becomes, why is Iran attacking its Arab neighbors, even though they were not the ones who initially attacked Iran? There are 3 possible reasons for this regional retaliation. The first reason is to impose heavy regional costs. The 12-day war demonstrated that Iran is unlikely to win in a direct confrontation with the United States. So this time, Iran may be trying to impose costs indirectly, through disruption to global energy markets and financial stability. European gas prices have already spiked nearly 50% after Qatar paused LNG production following the strikes on Monday. Oil prices also climbed above $80 per barrel after Saudi Arabia temporarily paused operations at its largest domestic oil refinery while assessing damage. The second reason is that Iran may be trying to force the United States to prioritize its defenses. Washington has numerous military assets and allies across the region, and multiple attacks could push the U.S. to make difficult choices about which partners it can realistically defend. This pressure comes at a time when U.S. military resources are already stretched. In August, for example, the United States had to move a key air defense system from the UAE to Israel, a sign that regional commitments are already competing for limited resources. If the conflict expands further, that strain will only increase. But the third, and perhaps most significant reason, is that Iran may be hoping the Gulf states themselves begin pushing Washington to end the war. In other words, Iran may be trying to raise the cost of the conflict so high for its neighbors that they pressure the United States to seek a diplomatic exit. It's a risky strategy, almost as, if I'm sinking, I'll cause as much disruption as possible approach. However, this gamble could easily backfire. Instead of pushing for peace, the Gulf monarchies might decide that Iran has crossed a red line and choose to retaliate. If that happens, Saudi Arabia in particular could attempt to reassert regional dominance. At this point, no one knows how this conflict will evolve, but it is already clear that these strikes have likely caused long-term damage to Iran's relations with its Arab neighbors. Which means that even after the war ends, regardless of the outcome, the Middle East may be entering another prolonged period of regional tension. I hope you found this analysis useful. If you like my content, you are most welcome to subscribe. Thanks, and I'll see you in the next one.